In this video, I'm going to be building our most insane gaming PC ever with a $1,500 motherboard, $2,500 GPU, and a $750 PC case. This is a build for those of you with, frankly, more money than sense. I'll be walking you through all the parts in this build, whether anyone should actually ever buy any of the parts I'm talking about, and looking at the performance later. Just how well does a $5,000 gaming PC actually perform? Let's find out. The GeekaWhat Aura 17 range of gaming notebooks are fantastic for playing the latest AAA titles at the best settings. With a 1080p 360Hz display, these are awesome for competitive gaming, featuring 12th gen Intel Core processors, which boast phenomenal single and multi-threaded performance for gaming and productivity applications. Learn more and check out the full range at the first links in the description below. Let's kick things off by taking a look at the motherboard first, and the first thing you're probably thinking is, James, that's huge. For comparison's sake, this is a normal Z690 motherboard. This is the Godlike. Oh yes. Now the Godlike from MSI is something we're going to feature properly in a dedicated video because it deserves 8 minutes of fame all on its own. In short though, this thing basically takes every single feature that Intel gave the Z690 chipset and integrates it in one way or another. With dual PCIe 5.0 slots, PCIe 5 for the M.2 primary slot, and then sextuple Gen 4 NVMe slots, this thing's just absolutely ridiculous. It's E80X, it's got a touchscreen, it's got RGB, it supports DDR5, it's like an overclocking champion, it's got 10 gigabit Ethernet. You get the gist. Anything that you could possibly want from a motherboard, this thing's got it. Now, I thought it was just going to be the motherboard. Oh no, I was wrong. I have received what can only be described as an unboxing experience. So let's take this off. Underneath here, with oh god, I might have slightly broken the unboxing experience. Potentially. Sorry. Inside the box, you'll find some RAM, apparently. I don't think you get that with all Godlike kits, and the motherboard itself. We've got some RGB Corsair RAM we'll be using today instead, though. Now, if we take the motherboard out, let's get this thing out of the way. It's so heavy. Look at the back of that. It's all metal plated. This is like the heaviest motherboard I've ever seen in my life. If we then take off this foam packaging... Nope. It's not very conducive with a smooth one-man unbox. Let's try that again. I think we can take the left and right sides out like some sort of Star Wars thing. And then in here, we'll find some radiator fans. We will find some brackets and screws. And then, I believe, if we look hard enough, we will find a radiator itself. Now, that's right. This motherboard, at least the kit we've got, comes included with one of MSI's 360mm all-in-ones that also, I think, features a screen. So we're, of course, going to be using that in today's build for the ultimate Godlike gaming setup build. I don't even know what to call this anymore. For a motherboard like this, there can only be one natural CPU choice. Well, technically two. Intel's Core i9-12900K or the slightly more expensive and binned 12900KS. I've gone for the standard K in this build as the KS is quite hard to find and very expensive, whereas the 12900K is by no means an affordable option. It is a lot cheaper than the 12900KS. Plus plenty of cores, plenty of threads still makes it an awesome choice for this build, which we can install nice and easily, a little something like so. While we're here, I'm also going to go ahead and install the RAM or the memory. I'm not typically a huge proponent of DDR5 for most high-end builds, as it's still really pricey and the performance upside is quite minimal. But for a top-range build like this, it makes complete sense. Plus, to get access to the very best motherboards, you'll also need to leverage DDR5 memory. I've gone ahead and picked up two kits of Corsair's Dominator Platinum RGB, one 2-dim set that is black and one 2-dim set that is white, to give us some nice alternating colours just to the right of our CPU socket. Plus with Capellix RGBs up top, they should look sick and should hopefully tie in to the rest of the build theme we're going for a little later. The theme, by the way, is just RGB and everything being massive, just to clear that one up. There really is nothing more satisfying than seeing a motherboard full with RAM DIMMs. It just looks so bougie and so high-end. I Love it. Next up, we can go ahead and pop in the storage for this build. A 2TB Seagate FireCuda 530. We've reviewed this drive in great detail, doing speed tests, performance analysis, and all that good stuff. And it's our favourite Gen 4 NVMe drive out there. Is it the cheapest? Definitely not, but that's not an objective of this build today. We're going to install it underneath the M.2 cover just here, which we can nice and easily remove. And if you take a look at the bottom of this cover, you'll notice there's this little sort of magnetic contact point. That makes contact with the motherboard and then allows the RGB on the M.2 slot to work. It's one of the reasons I'd probably recommend you go for a non-heatsink drive because you can keep the aesthetic of the board nice and uniform. Add your M.2 NVMe drive into place a little something like so. Drop it down and then fasten it in with our toolless retention socket. There we go, nice and easy. And then we can add the heatsink back into place. I think as far as the motherboard goes, we've had basically all the fun we can have, at least for now. But don't worry, because things are about to get slightly bigger and slightly more exciting as we move. This is so heavy. Like, for a motherboard, I can't even explain how heavy this is. As we move our very heavy motherboard. Did I mention it's heavy? We move our motherboard into the case for this build. Probably the best high-end case on the market right now. Cooler Master's HAF 700 EVO. This is a case that just ticks every box for anybody building a high-end system. It supports more fans than any other consumer design on the market. It's got these nice panels up front, which are actually sheets of glass rather than acrylic. That's pretty sick. It's got tempered glass side panels, awesome for water cooling, a screen on the front as well, which we can also customize to show key system info or, you know, the GeekaWhat logo. It's just one of those cases that does it all. Do you pay for it? Oh yes, it's expensive. But is it worth it for this build? I think so. There we go. We've finally got it out of the box. Now you can see a bit more closely what I'm talking about here when it comes to design. It's just so imposing, but despite being massive, it doesn't feel bland and it doesn't feel like the design just gets lost. I love Corsair's 7000 series. I think they're great cases, but they're just very much of the same. And I can't help but feel that they don't make full advantage of the massive form factor they sit in. Cooler Master haven't made that mistake on this one. As with any build, even regardless of the case's size, we're still going to go ahead and split off as many panels and stuff like that as we possibly can. That will naturally make getting access to all the bits and bobs inside of our case and installing the motherboard a lot easier. It begins to look even more impressive when you actually take all the panels off because it shows how intricate the design actually is. Let me point out a few key things. The radiator mount at the bottom can be angled to actually make the whole thing look a bit more imposing. You've got a mirror design here. You can go for a vertical GPU mount at the back if you've got the right riser cable and your graphics card's not too big and bulky. You've got 220mm sickle flow fans included at the rear, two 200mm fans included at the front, none at the top, but that's okay, we'll fix that later. And yeah, I mean, it's just obscene. It's a case where you have to spend so much money filling it up, otherwise it's going to look ridiculous. One thing I normally do is I do lay cases down flat for the installation of the motherboard, and I'm going to do that today because I don't want to risk dropping the Godlike in some sort of poorly orchestrated installation. So let's lay this flat, then slide the motherboard into place.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
Houston, we've got quite a big problem. It's actually not going to fit with these fans installed. That is a bit worrying for later, but I'm going to take the fans off for now, then pop the motherboard in and see if the fans will go straight back on. I'm hoping they will, otherwise things have got quite a bit more complicated. High-end builds never go to plan.
5 minutes later.
All I've got to do now is refasten that fan back into place, and then we can progress with the next stage of the build. These sort of interruptions are sadly to be expected on a build that is quite this unique and quite so high-end. What we're going to be doing next up is installing the cooler into place. Now this is MSI's S360. It comes with a screen. That's pretty cool. It also comes with a 360mm radiator for plenty of CPU cooling. To install the cooler, we first need to add the backplate onto the rear of the motherboard before popping on all of the mounting hardware that comes included in the box. MSI have actually created a really handy installation guide, which I'll link below, and helped me out a lot when installing it in this build. The guide covers different options as well for whether you go for an AMD or an Intel build, Threadripper, whatever the choices that you make are, the guide covers it nicely, which is good to see. The included non-RGB fans are going to work well for us at the top of the case, and then we'll add some RGB ones underneath for push-pull on the radiator later on. We're going to hide the non-RGB fans away where no one can see them, but where they can still pull nice fresh sharing for our CPU cooler. First things first, let's screw the radiator and the fans in, and then we'll pop the block on afterwards.
A few minutes later.
Change of plan, this is just not going to work up right. There's too many moving parts, there's too much weight, and too much value as well. So I'm going to lay this down flat once again, then install the CPU cooler, and then I think I need like a cup of tea or something. Being British, this is just all getting a little bit much. We'll be adding in any fans, RGB accessories or cables later, because first it's time to pop in the GPU, and for this build, there could be only one choice. This right here is the MSI SUPRIM X RTX 3090 Ti. Oh yes. There aren't many words to describe this GPU other than utterly insane. For 4K gaming, the thing is a complete beast, and this triple slot MSI cooler does an amazing job of keeping what is a very hot and very powerful GPU cool. AMD's 6950 XT is another good shout for this build, but with DLSS and ray tracing being so much better on the Nvidia side of the equation, at least for now anyway, this makes total sense for what we're trying to achieve. You even get included this, which is like a GPU support bracket, which you can pop in the case, adjust to the right level and tighten up to prevent GPU sag, something which will be very important in a build like this one. We've also got to plug up this really horrible dongle to the graphics card for now, which we'll try and manage to make look as neat as possible, but that's not going to be particularly easy. That's a problem for later though. Once the graphics card is in, we can then go ahead and move on to the final core component, the power supply. This is the MSI 1000 watt A1000G. For a build like this, you actually do need 1000 watts, and with next gen PCIe 5 graphics cards, it's likely the power trend will continue. I've also gone ahead and picked up these lovely sleeved cable extensions from Easy DIY Fab, which I'll link in the description below. They do loads and loads of different colours in loads of different flavours. Not a sponsored bit, I bought these myself, but I think they're a really great option for anyone looking to take that build a bit further. They also come with included cable combs, helping us to better manage our CPU, GPU, and motherboard power connections. They look fantastic and will work amazingly in this build. With this being a fully modular power supply, we've only got to install the cables we actually need, but as it turns out for this build, that's quite a lot. Our GPU uses 3 8-pin connections and is, safe to say, quite power hungry. Grab all of these in and we can round things off with all the extra components that will help to give this build just that bit of wow factor. I'm loving the look of those cable extensions, a little bit less so this awful dongle, but it's fine, we'll get over that. To finish things off, we're going to add in some Corsair light panels, some additional RGB fans and RGB strips to make the system look sick. And then of course we can finally boot the thing up, see how it performs, and of course how good it looks with all of our core components and extra RGB accessories. Let's do this. Looking amazing. It was never in doubt that our 3090 Ti build was going to look the part, but just how well does the performance stack up? Arguably more important. Well, we've tested a wide variety of titles at 4K, maximum settings, using ray tracing, DLSS, you name it. We've turned it on to push this system to the max. And I can tell you the results we have achieved are another level. Let's kick things off with Battlefield 2042. 4K, high settings, DLSS enabled, we pulled in 115 frames per second. It was a similarly positive story in one of the newest titles out there, COD Vanguard. A game that, while it's had a mixed reception, is still a great performance test. 4K high settings, 123 frames per second on average. And the story continues. Both Forza Horizon 5 and Halo Infinite, we pulled in 105 and 102 frames per second respectively at 4K high settings, while other titles like Apex Legends also delivered great results. Here we achieved over 150 frames per second at 4K high, with a buttery smooth gaming experience that quite frankly looked phenomenal. And the good results don't end there. Fortnite at 1080p competitive settings, we know you guys love this setup. We got nearly 300 frames, so 272 to be precise, more than enough to drive the latest high refresh rate monitors. But our testing didn't stop there, with COD Warzone also clocking in at 4K high settings with a very respectable 108 FPS. As I say, you can find full gaming benchmark runs for all our builds linked below. This build has been an awesome one to put together, so thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.